Maple Grove, Oregon, was the kind of place people moved to when they wanted life to slow down. The town sat just far enough from the city to keep traffic noise to a faint hum on the horizon, but close enough that grocery runs didn't feel like a trek. Streets here were lined with maples that exploded into fiery reds and golds in autumn and filled the air with a sweet, earthy scent in spring. Neighbors waved at each other without hesitation. The sidewalks were cracked in places, but no one minded. They felt more like laugh lines than flaws. That afternoon, sunlight streamed lazily through puffy white clouds, casting a dappled glow across Emma Hayes' front yard. The scent of freshly mowed grass hung in the air, mingling with the faint aroma of grilled burgers drifting over from somewhere down the street. A soft breeze carried the sound of a lawnmower in the distance, and the rhythmic creak of Emma's porch swing as she rocked gently back and forth. She cradled a tall glass of iced tea, the condensation beating along its sides and dripping onto her palm. At her feet, her 3-year-old son, Noah, was sprawled out on the lawn, a small fortress of brightly colored building blocks slowly taking shape in front of him. He hummed tunelessly as he worked, his messy blonde hair catching glints of sunlight. Every so often, he would pause to examine his creation with a seriousness far beyond his years, then add another block with the careful precision of a miniature architect. It was a moment that felt timeless, the kind of scene you might find on the front of a postcard or in the closing shot of a feel-good movie. Then, down the street, the low rumble of an approaching engine drifted into earshot. Emma glanced up, squinting into the sunlight as a black and white police SUV rolled slowly past the row of houses. The vehicle's windows were down, and from the back seat, a large German shepherd poked his head out, nose twitching as he sniffed the afternoon air. The dog's amber eyes scanned the street with the kind of sharp focus that only comes from years of training. Emma smiled faintly. She had seen that particular canine unit around before Officer Daniels and his partner, Rex, were a familiar sight in Maple Grove. Daniels was a tall, broad-shouldered man in his late 30s, with the kind of calm, measured presence that could instantly make strangers feel at ease. Rex, on the other hand, exuded a quiet but unmistakable authority. Even sitting still, the dog gave off the sense that he could go from relaxed to full alert in an instant. As the SUV slowed near her driveway, Noah looked up from his block tower and froze, eyes going wide. "Doggy," he shouted, his voice ringing out with pure, unfiltered joy. Before Emma could stop him, he scrambled to his feet and started running toward the sidewalk, his little sneakers thudding against the grass. "Noah, careful," Emma called, setting down her tea. She stood, brushing bits of grass from her jeans, but she couldn't help smiling at his enthusiasm. Daniel spotted them and brought the SUV to a slow stop along the curb. He stepped out, giving a polite wave. "Afternoon, Emma," he said warmly. "Hey, Officer Daniels," she replied. "Just enjoying the weather. Perfect day for heat," he agreed, moving to open the back door of the SUV. Rex jumped down with practiced ease, landing softly on the pavement. He was bigger up close than most people expected, his fur a mix of deep sable and tan, his ears alert. But when Noah approached, Rex's expression softened ever so slightly, tail giving a single measured wag. Noah stopped just short of touching him, looking up at Daniels for permission. Daniels smiled. "Go ahead, buddy. He likes gentle pets." Noah reached out with a tentative hand and brushed it over Rex's head, giggling when the dog leaned slightly into the touch. Then, as if compelled by some inner urgency, Noah leaned close to Rex's ear and whispered something. Emma couldn't quite catch it, but she saw Daniel's brow furrow slightly. He crouched down, his eyes flicking between Noah and Rex. "What was that you said, champ?" Noah grinned and repeated it, this time loud enough for both adults to hear. Shiny box in the shed. Emma blinked. What? She gave a small, bewildered laugh. Noah, what shiny box? But Noah had already turned back to Rex, now stroking his back as if the two were old friends. Daniels didn't laugh. His gaze had shifted toward Emma's backyard, the expression in his eyes hard. To read. The air seemed to shift ever so slightly. The warm afternoon suddenly felt less like a lazy day and more like the prelude to something. Daniels straightened, his tone light but edged with professional curiosity. You have a shed out back, right? Emma nodded slowly. Yeah, why? Rex's ears twitched at the word shed. He stood up straighter, sniffing the air again, and let out a low, almost inaudible sound from deep in his chest. Emma's smile faltered. She had no idea why her son had said what he said, but something in the way both man and dog reacted told her it wasn't the kind of remark they could just shrug off. And yet, she couldn't shake the thought, this was Maple Grove. Nothing bad ever happened here. At least, that's what she had always believed. Noah had never been shy, but the way he locked onto Rex was something different. His little hands stayed pressed gently against the dog's fur, fingers curling slightly as if holding on to a secret. Rex's tail gave another slow wag, but his eyes never left Noah's face alert, intent, almost curious. Officer Daniels crouched beside them, resting one hand on Rex's back. Shiny box in the shed, huh? His voice was calm, almost casual, but Emma caught the faint undercurrent of attention. It wasn't the way you respond when a child says something cute. It was the way a detective reacts when a puzzle piece falls unexpectedly into their lap. Emma shook her head slightly, half amused and half puzzled. I think he's just making things up. He plays a lot of pretend games. Daniel smiled faintly, but didn't dismiss it. Kids do say some interesting things, he said. And sometimes those things, well, they turn out to mean something. Noah was now crouching on the sidewalk beside Rex, patting his side in a steady rhythm. His small face was animated, eyes wide as he spoke again. It's heavy, he told the dog as if the animal needed to know. And Uncle Kevin said not to tell Mommy. The words landed like a stone in Emma's stomach. She blinked, her mind scrambling to keep up. Wait, what? Noah, what did you just say? But Noah had already shifted back into toddler ramble, telling Rex about the butterfly he had chased earlier. Daniel's eyes met Emma's. His expression wasn't accusing, but it was focused. Uncle Kevin? He asked gently. Emma exhaled, rubbing her arms as if the warmth of the sun had suddenly disappeared. My brother. But I haven't seen him in months since, before he. She trailed off, not wanting to spill personal history into the street. Daniels didn't press, but his attention returned to Rex, whose ears were perked, body angled subtly toward Emma's backyard. The dog wasn't straining or barking, just tuned in, like a radio dial fixed on a faint but certain signal. Emma tried to convince herself this was all some strange coincidence. Maybe Noah had seen a toy in the shed and was just telling a story. But a part of her, a small, uneasy part, was beginning to realize that Daniel's instincts weren't something to ignore. The breeze shifted, carrying with it the smell of damp earth and cut grass. Somewhere nearby, a sprinkler clicked to life, sending a fine mist over a neighbor's flower beds. The everyday noises of Maple Grove hummed on, blissfully unaware that in the space of a few sentences, Emma's comfortable afternoon had taken on an edge. Daniels rose from his crouch. Mind if I ask him a couple more questions? Emma hesitated. Noah was too young to understand the weight of anything he might say. But she nodded. Go ahead. Daniels knelt again, his tone light. Noah, buddy, can you tell me more about the shiny box? What color is it? Gray, Noah answered without hesitation. And it has little clicky things on the front. He made a motion with his hands, like turning knobs. Emma frowned. She couldn't think of anything in the shed that matched that description. What else? Daniels prompted. Noah's voice dropped conspiratorially, the way children do when they're sharing something important. Uncle Kevin said it's for his work. But he was whispering, and he looked behind him a lot. Rex's head tilted slightly, his gaze flicking toward the backyard again. Daniels gave him a brief, almost imperceptible signal, and the dog's body went even more alert. Emma felt her pulse quicken. Look, I'm sure it's nothing. Kevin, well, he hasn't exactly been reliable, but I don't want to. Daniels cut her off gently. Emma, you don't have to explain anything right now. But in my experience, it's always worth checking things out, especially when a canine is reacting like this. Noah, oblivious to the tension in his mother's voice, giggled and reached up to scratch behind Rex's ears. The German shepherd didn't take his eyes off the yard. The moment stretched, sunlight glinting off the SUV's polished hood. A bird chirping from somewhere overhead. To any passerby, it might have looked like a friendly chat between a local officer, a young mom, and a curious child. But Emma could feel something shifting beneath the surface, like the first faint tremor, before an earthquake. Finally, Daniels straightened again, brushing dust from his uniform. Tell you what, he said lightly, why don't we take a quick peek at that shed? Won't take more than a minute, and then I can tell Rex he's just being paranoid. Emma forced a small laugh, but her voice was thin. Sure, if it'll make you feel better. Daniel smiled, but his eyes stayed sharp. It's not me I'm worried about. It's Rex. He's got a nose for things people don't always see or don't want to. Emma glanced at her son, who was now skipping in small circles around. Rex, humming a tune only he knew. The image was innocent, almost comical, but the words he had spoken clung stubbornly in her mind. Shiny box, heavy, don't tell Mommy. As Daniels walked toward the side of the house, gesturing for her to lead the way, Emma felt a strange mix of dread and disbelief. She had nothing to hide. She knew that. And yet, the shed suddenly felt like a closed chapter she wasn't sure she wanted to open. Behind them, Rex moved with measured purpose, his nails clicking softly against the pavement. Every so often, he lifted his head to the breeze, nostrils flaring as if tasting the air. And in that moment, Emma realized something unsettling. The dog wasn't just following them. He was hunting. They hadn't even reached the backyard before Emma noticed a change in Rex's posture. His movements were no longer the relaxed, almost friendly steps of a neighborhood patrol dog. His head was lowered slightly, ears pricked forward, and his gaze was fixed, not on the yard in general, but on one narrow path that curved around the side of the house toward the shed. Officer Daniels walked with the casual confidence of someone used to observing without alarming, but Emma didn't miss the way his eyes tracked every small detail. His hand rested loosely on Rex's lead, but she could tell from the faint tension in his fingers that he was tuned in, ready to react. The side yard was shaded, the air cooler here. The wooden fence cast long shadows, and a faint smell of damp soil mixed with the lingering scent of the morning's rain. Emma's sneakers crunched softly against the gravel path. Danielle's boots, in contrast, landed with almost no sound at all a habit, she guessed, born from years of moving quietly into unknown situations. Noah followed behind them, still humming to himself, occasionally hopping over small cracks in the path. He seemed entirely oblivious to the undercurrent of unease threading its way through the moment. Rex slowed as they approached the bend. Toward the backyard, his body now angled slightly ahead of Daniel's, like a compass needle drawn to true north. His breathing deepened, nostrils flaring in sharp bursts. Emma didn't know much about police dogs, but even she could tell Rex wasn't just interested. He was locked on. "Emma," Daniel said in a low voice, "can you remind me when you last went into your shed?" She thought about it, realizing it had been longer than she'd expected. Maybe a few weeks ago? I usually just keep garden tools in there. Rakes, the mower, some old paint cans. Any reason your brother would have been in there?" The question was simple, but it landed heavily. "No," she said firmly. "Kevin hasn't been over. At least, not that I know of." Daniels nodded, not confirming or denying her answer, just filing it away. As they stepped into the backyard, the sun returned, bright enough to make Emma squint. The shed sat in the far corner, its once red paint faded to a muted rust color. One of the hinges on the door was slightly crooked, a detail she'd noticed before, but never thought much about. Rex's pace quickened, pulling slightly at the lead. Daniels let him take the extra slack, but kept control, his eyes scanning not just the shed, but the ground around it. "See how his tail is stiff?" Daniels asked quietly. "He's in what we call a focused alert. He's detected something unusual, and his attention won't shift until he's checked it out." Emma folded her arms. "You're saying he smells something?" "Smells, hears, senses. Dogs like Rex don't just pick up on scent. They process a whole combination of cues, tiny sounds, changes in the air, chemical traces we can't detect. And when he reacts like this, there's almost always a reason." Rex reached the shed door and stopped abruptly. His nose hovered near the seam where the door met the frame, inhaling deeply. Then, with a sudden movement, he pawed at the lower edge 3 sharp scrapes, followed by a low, guttural growl. Emma's skin prickled. She'd lived in this house for years, and the shed had always been just another part of the background. Now, under Rex's scrutiny, it felt different, like a place she didn't quite know anymore. Daniels crouched beside Rex, speaking to him in a low, measured tone. The dog responded with another scrape of his paw, then a short bark. "Okay," Daniels said quietly, almost to himself. "That's confirmation." Emma swallowed hard. "Confirmation of what?" "That there's something in there he considers out of place or potentially dangerous." She let out a nervous laugh, the sound brittle. "It's just a shed." Daniel's eyes flicked to her, steady but not unkind. "Emma, I've seen dogs like Rex pull weapons out of walls, find hidden cache in floorboards, even detect explosives buried underground. If he's alerting, it's not nothing." Noah, still in his own little world, was now crouched in the grass nearby, watching a ladybug crawl along his fingertip. He didn't notice the way his mother's hands had started to tremble slightly. Daniel stood, adjusting the lead. "Mind if I take a closer look?" Emma hesitated. Her logical brain told her it was fine. She had nothing to hide. But another part of her, the one that had felt a knot forming in her stomach since Noah's odd comment, whispered that opening that shed might change something she couldn't undo. Still, she nodded. "Go ahead." Rex shifted his weight forward as Daniel stepped toward the door. The officer gave the handle a light tug. It opened without resistance, but only an inch before stopping. Daniels glanced down and saw why a small stack of paint cans had been pushed up against the inside. Emma blinked. "That's strange. I don't remember putting those there." Daniels didn't respond. He slid the cans aside with his foot, opening the door fully. The inside of the shed smelled of wood, dust, and faintly of gasoline from the lawnmower. Light filtered through a small, grimy window, illuminating the clutter. Rex didn't waste time sniffing at the obvious. Instead, he went straight to the back corner, bypassing shelves of tools and gardening supplies. He lowered his head, sniffed deeply, and pawed at a tarp-covered pile. Daniels followed him, crouching down to pull the tarp back. Emma stepped closer, her heart thudding. Beneath the tarp was something she didn't recognize, something that did not belong in her shed at all. It was the size of a small suitcase, made of metal, with a dull gray finish and two heavy-duty locks. Emma stared at it, the words falling from her lips almost involuntarily. That's the shiny box. For a long, heavy moment, no one spoke. The shed was quiet, except for the faint rustle of the tarp settling back into place. Sunlight slanted through the dusty window, casting narrow beams that landed directly on the metal case, making its edges glint faintly. Officer Daniels stayed crouched, his gaze fixed on the box without touching it. Rex stood beside him, tail stiff, head lowered, breathing in short, focused bursts. The air in the small shed felt suddenly too warm, heavy with the scent of old wood and motor oil. Emma stood in the doorway, one hand braced against the frame. She couldn't take her eyes off the thing. The shiny box was exactly as Noah had described gray, with clicky things on the front, heavy-looking, out of place. Daniels finally broke the silence. "Emma," he said quietly, "do you know what this is?" She shook her head quickly. "No, I've never seen it before." His eyes flicked briefly to her, searching for any sign of hesitation, then returned to the case. "Do you mind if I open it?" The question, though politely phrased, landed with weight. Emma knew it wasn't really a request. It was an official step, one that could lead to a chain of events she couldn't predict. But what choice did she have? This was her shed, her property, and there was a box inside that shouldn't be there. She swallowed hard. "Do what you need to do." Daniels gave a single nod, then reached for his radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 7. I need a second unit and a lock-breaking kit at my location. Possible evidence on site. Secure perimeter." His tone was calm but firm, the kind of voice that made Emma's stomach twist. Rex remained at the box, watching it as if it might move on its own. Every so often, he let out a soft huff of breath through his nose, then lowered his head again to sniff the air around it. Noah, still outside in the yard, was now singing softly to himself, completely unaware of the shift in atmosphere. Emma glanced over her shoulder at him, her chest tightening. The innocence in his voice was so pure, and yet it had just set in motion something that felt anything but innocent. Daniels stood, stepping back from the case. "We're going to wait for backup before we open it," he said. "If there's anything dangerous inside, chemicals, explosives, it's safer this way." Emma nodded, hugging her arms. She wanted to ask what he thought was in it, but part of her was afraid to hear the answer. Minutes later, another patrol car pulled up in front of the house. Officer Patel, a younger man with sharp eyes, stepped out carrying a small pry kit. Daniels met him halfway, speaking in a low voice before leading him into the backyard. Emma moved aside to let them both into the shed. Patel gave the case a long look and crouched down to inspect the locks. "These are heavy-duty," he murmured. "Not something you pick up at a hardware store." "That's what I thought," Daniels replied. "Let's pop it." Patel wedged the flat end of a crowbar into the seam near the first lock. With a grunt, he leaned his weight into it. The lock groaned, metal straining against metal, before snapping open with a sharp, echoing crack. The sound made Emma flinch. The second lock gave way more easily, a dull clank as it fell to the wooden floor. Daniels exhaled once, then reached for the lid. Rex shifted slightly, his body tense, ready for whatever might come next. Before opening it, Daniels glanced back at Emma. "You said you've never seen this before." "Never," she repeated, her voice steady this time. "And I have no idea how it got here." He held her gaze for a moment, then nodded and turned back to the case. With a slow, deliberate motion, he lifted the lid. Emma couldn't help leaning forward. Her breath caught somewhere between her chest and throat. The hinges gave a faint squeal as the lid swung upward, and then stopped just short of revealing the contents when Daniels froze. He didn't say anything immediately. Instead, his eyes narrowed, scanning whatever lay inside. Patel stepped closer, peering over his shoulder. Emma's pulse pounded in her ears. The pause felt unbearable. "What is it?" she finally demanded. Daniels looked up at her. His expression had shifted, still calm, but edged with something harder now. "Emma, you might want to stay back." Her heart lurched. "Why? What's in there?" He didn't answer directly. "Patel, radio in. We've got more than we thought." Rex gave a short, sharp bark, as if punctuating the officer's words. Emma's knees felt suddenly weak. She gripped the doorway tighter, her mind spiraling through possibilities she didn't want to imagine. Her brother's name flashed in her head unbidden, and she tried to push it away, but it stayed there, stubborn and cold. Noah's small voice drifted from the yard. "Mommy, is Rex finding treasure?" Emma turned toward him, forcing a smile she didn't feel. "Something like that, sweetheart." Behind her, Daniels and Patel were already moving into a more methodical mode, snapping photos of the open case before touching anything inside. The air in the shed felt heavier than ever, the late afternoon sunlight outside seeming almost unreal in contrast to the shadows gathering here. Whatever lay in that box, Emma realized it wasn't just going to change the rest of her day, it was going to change everything. Patel set his crowbar aside and crouched next to the open case, his flashlight beam sweeping over the contents. Dust particles floated lazily in the sunlight, filtering through the shed window, but the light inside the case gleamed in a way that was anything but ordinary. Daniels, still kneeling beside it, kept his voice low. "We're dealing with cash, a lot of it." Emma felt her stomach drop. "Cash?" Patel adjusted his flashlight, and she saw it clearly, stacks of bills, bundled in neat, tight bricks, with thick rubber bands. The edges of the notes were worn and grimy, but the quantity was undeniable. Daniels didn't stop there. His gloved hands carefully lifted the top layer of bundles, revealing a second, darker shape beneath. And 2 handguns, both without serial numbers. Emma's mouth went dry. The words didn't seem to fit together in her head. Cash, guns, her shed. "I've never seen those before," she said quickly, her voice almost too fast. "I swear to you, I don't know how they got here." Daniels didn't accuse, didn't even raise an eyebrow. "I believe you," he said evenly, "but I have to document everything exactly as we find it. This isn't something we can just ignore." Rex gave a soft whine, circling to the other side of the shed before settling near the door, his gaze scanning the yard as though guarding the scene. Patel was already snapping photos from multiple angles, the contents in place, then each item individually. "These bills are bundled in the exact way we've seen in some robbery cases," he said, almost as if thinking aloud. "And the guns? Looks like they've been wiped clean. Whoever put them here didn't want to be traced." Emma stepped closer, but stopped herself from crossing the threshold. She didn't want to be anywhere near the case. Even from a few feet away, the sight of it made her skin crawl. Her voice came out quieter now. "You think my brother—" Daniels glanced up. "Is Kevin the only one who's had access to your shed without your knowledge?" The question cut straight to the truth she'd been avoiding. She closed her eyes briefly before answering. "He's the only one with any reason to come here uninvited. And Noah said Uncle Kevin told him not to tell me about the shiny box." Daniels nodded slowly, like someone fitting the last pieces of a puzzle together. "That's important. We'll need you to give an official statement." Patel zipped open a small evidence bag and began carefully placing each item inside. Cash bundles first, then the weapons. The sound of the bills sliding against each other was soft but unsettling, like a whisper Emma didn't want to hear. When the last item was secured, Daniels closed the now empty case and set it aside for fingerprint dusting later. "We'll run the serial numbers on the bills if we can find them in the bands, but my guess is they're linked to something recent. Emma gripped the shed doorway, steadying herself. And if they are? Then this isn't just hidden property, it's evidence in a felony case. Daniel's voice was steady, professional, but there was no sugarcoating it. Outside, Noah's laughter floated across the yard as he chased a patch of sunlight. The sound felt painfully out of sync with the scene inside the shed. Emma couldn't stop herself from thinking how easily this could have been worse. How close. Her family was to something dangerous, without even knowing. Patel finished sealing the evidence bags and handed them to Daniels, who double-checked each label. "We'll get these logged immediately," Daniels said. "Emma will also need to check for any signs of forced entry to your yard or shed. That'll help us confirm whether someone came in without your permission." Emma nodded numbly. "Of course. Anything you need." Daniel's gaze softened slightly. "I know this is a lot, but believe me, your son just helped us stop something bigger. You should be proud of him." The words hit her harder than she expected. Proud. The idea that Noah's innocent words could lead to uncovering something so serious felt surreal. She managed a small nod, though her throat felt tight. As the officers stepped out of the shed, Patel carrying the sealed bags and Daniels holding the empty case, Rex followed close behind, his posture still alert. Daniels took one last look at the structure, his eyes lingering on the window and a crooked hinge. "I'd recommend getting a stronger lock," he said. "Not because I expect anything else to happen, but because whoever put this here didn't think twice about using your property." Emma exhaled, feeling the full weight of that truth. Patel headed toward the patrol car, loading the evidence into the trunk. Daniels stayed a moment longer, crouching to scratch Rex's head. The dog's tail gave a slow, deliberate wag, the first sign of ease since he'd stepped into the yard. "Good work, partner," Daniels murmured. Noah, spotting them from across the yard, ran over and wrapped his little arms around Rex's neck. "Did you find the treasure?" he asked, grinning up at Daniels. Daniels looked at Emma before answering. "Yeah, buddy," he said with a faint smile. "We found it." But in his eyes, Emma could see the unspoken truth. This was no treasure. And whatever story had started in her shed today wasn't finished yet. The evidence bags were gone, locked securely in the trunk of the second patrol car. The shed door stood open, sunlight pouring across the now empty corner where the shiny box had been. The air felt lighter without it, but Emma couldn't shake the feeling that the damage had already been done, that whatever had been hidden there had left more than just an empty space behind. Daniels closed his notebook and slid it into his vest pocket. "We'll run everything through the lab tonight. The bills might be traceable, though cash this dirty is often laundered several times. The guns, well, those we can work with." Emma stood with her arms crossed, the late afternoon sun warming her back, but not her thoughts. "You think Kevin put it there?" It wasn't really a question, but Daniels didn't rush to confirm it. "I think we have a solid reason to. Look at him. The items are consistent with what's taken in high cash robberies. And you mentioned he's been here before, even if not recently." Her jaw tightened. "Not since he got out. And I wanted it to stay that way." Daniels tilted his head slightly. "Got out?" She hesitated, then sighed. 6 months ago. He was in prison for burglary. It wasn't violent, but he's always been on that edge. The kind of person who doesn't mind crossing lines if it gets him what he wants." That earned a quiet nod from Daniels. "Do you know if he's been working since his release?" Emma let out a humorless laugh. "Working? If by working you mean crashing on couches and making excuses, then yes." From across the yard, Noah called out, "Mommy, look at my butterfly." He held up a cupped hand, beaming. The contrast between his innocent joy and the conversation's gravity almost made Emma's chest ache. Patel approached from the front, having finished a sweep of the property. No signs of forced entry on the yard fence, he reported. But the latch on the gate's worn enough that it wouldn't take much to pop it open. No camera coverage. Either, Daniels nodded. Matches the profile of someone who knew the place and its weaknesses. He glanced at Emma. Would Kevin have known the gate was easy to get through? Yes, she admitted reluctantly. He's been here enough times to know. The conversation paused as Daniels keyed his radio. Dispatch, run a check on Kevin Hayes. Recent known associates? Outstanding warrants, and see if his name pops on any ongoing investigations. The radio crackled back a moment later. Copy that. Stand by. Patel shifted his weight. You think he stashed it here to hide it from whoever he stole it from, or from us? Daniels shrugged. Could be both. People hide things in plain sight all the time, especially if it's somewhere the police wouldn't think to look right away. Family property's a common choice. Emma's throat tightened. So I could have been what? Charged? Arrested? Daniel's voice was calm, but his words didn't sugarcoat. If we'd found that case under different circumstances, yes, it could have been bad for you. Possession laws are clear, and the burden often falls on the property owner to prove. They didn't know. Her stomach turned. And all this time, I had no idea it was sitting back there. That's the problem with people like Kevin, Daniel said. They'll gamble with someone else's safety if it buys them a little time. The radio crackled again. Unit 7, be advised Kevin Hayes is connected to an open investigation in Multnomah County. Suspected involvement in a liquor store robbery 2 weeks ago. No charges yet, but vehicle matching his was seen leaving the scene. Also, last known address is a motel off Route 22. No current warrants. Daniel's gaze sharpened. Copy. Send all relevant case files to my unit. He clipped the radio back to his vest and looked at Emma. That's enough for us to go have a conversation with him. Emma shook her head slowly. I can't believe he dragged me into this. Daniels gave her a steady look. Believe it. The good news is, because of Noah, we have the box before he or anyone else could move it again. Patel checked his watch. If we leave now, we can catch him before dark. Emma felt the pang of unease. Do you think he'll come here? Looking for it? Daniels considered it. Possible, but less likely now that he knows police have been here. We'll keep a unit circling the area tonight, just in case. Rex, sensing movement toward the gate, rose from his spot and padded over. Daniels rested a hand briefly on the dog's back. You've got a good watchdog in him today. Emma managed the faintest of smiles. And a good talker in my son. Apparently. Daniel's tone softened just slightly. Kids have a way of telling the truth before they know it's dangerous. In this case, that honesty might have saved you from a whole lot of trouble. As they prepared to leave, Patel handed Emma a business card. If Kevin tries to contact you, anytime, day or night, call this number first. Don't try to handle him yourself. She took it, gripping it tightly between her fingers. The patrol cars rolled away, their engines fading into the evening hum of the neighborhood. Emma stood in the driveway, Noah tugging at her hand, eager to show her the butterfly now resting on his sleeve. She looked down at him, her heart twisting, with relief and dread all at once. You did a good thing today, she said softly. Noah just smiled, not knowing the full weight of her words. In the distance, somewhere down Route 22, Kevin Hayes was going about his evening, unaware that his sister's backyard and her 3-year-old son had just unraveled, the one place he thought was safe to hide his secrets. By the time Daniels and Patel reached the Route 22 exit, the sun was sliding low on the horizon, casting long orange streaks across the cracked asphalt. The radio in Patel's cruiser buzzed with updates from another unit that had gone ahead to scout the area. The motel in Aging, L-shaped building with a flickering neon sign, was the kind of place you drove past without a second glance, unless you knew what you were looking for. Unit 3 to Daniels, the voice crackled through. Targets. Vehicle spotted in the west lot. Dark blue Ford pickup, plate matches. Daniels reached for the mic. Copy. Hold position until we're on site. Let's do this clean. Patel eased the car off the highway and into a side street, pulling up short of the motel entrance. From here, they could see the building clearly, a row of faded doors, some open to let stale air out, others sealed tight. A couple of people loitered by the vending machine, their expressions shifting warily at the sight of a second unmarked car pulling in. Danielle scanned the lot. That's him. Corner room, ground floor. Curtains half drawn. Think he knows? Patel asked. Daniels shook his head. Not yet. Let's keep it that way. They stepped out, Daniels giving a low hand signal to the other officers already positioned near the far stairwell. Rex, harnessed and ready, hopped out of the back seat, his ears up, nose twitching. The plan was straightforward. Approach the room from 2 angles, block both exits, and make the arrest before Kevin had time to run or destroy evidence. Daniels and Rex would take the front. Patel, and a uniformed officer, would cover the rear window and back door. They moved quietly, boots crunching over stray gravel, until they were in position. Daniels rapped twice on the door, voice calm but firm. Kevin Hayes, police, open up. A pause, then movement inside quick, unsteady. Daniels knocked again, louder this time. Kevin, don't make this harder than it needs to be. The curtain shifted. A shadow passed across it. And then a muffled voice. What's this about? Open the door, and we'll talk, Daniels replied evenly. For a moment, Emma's brother didn't move. Then came the metallic click of the lock turning. The door opened just enough to show his face unshaven, eyes darting past Daniels to the parking lot. Evening, Kevin, Daniels said, keeping his voice steady. Step outside. Kevin's smirk was thin and forced. You got a warrant? We have probable cause, Daniels said, and we can talk about the details once you're in custody. Step out. Hands where I can see them. Kevin hesitated, eyes narrowing. This about my sister? Daniels didn't blink. Step out now. Something in Daniels' tone must have registered, because Kevin finally raised his hands and stepped into the open. In one smooth motion, Daniels cuffed him, reading his rights as Rex stood alert at his side. From the rear of the building, Patel's voice came over the radio. Back secure. No movement inside. Kevin's bravado flickered as they walked him toward the cruiser. You can't pin anything on me, he said, his voice climbing. Whatever you think you found, it ain't mine. Daniels didn't look at him. We'll let the evidence speak. Inside the room, Patel began his search. The place smelled faintly of smoke and something sour. The bed was unmade, clothes in a heap in the corner. On the table, a burner phone buzzed with an incoming call that Patel quickly bagged. Under the mattress, he found a folded map with 2 liquor stores circled and read one of them the site of the recent robbery Kevin was suspected in. Patel's voice came over the radio again. Got something. Looks like planning material. Matches the robbery timeline. By the time they loaded Kevin into the back of the patrol car, he'd gone quiet, staring at the floorboard as the weight of the arrest settled over him. Daniels shut the door and stepped back, exhaling slowly. One less hiding place for him. He murmured. Back at her house, Emma paced the kitchen, the phone pressed tight to her ear. Daniel's voice on the other end was steady but decisive. He's in custody. We're bringing him in for questioning, and with what we found, there's a strong case. She leaned against the counter, relief flooding in, But it wasn't simple relief. It was tangled with grief, disappointment, and a strange kind of mourning for the brother she thought she'd lost years ago, only to lose him again in a different way. "Will he go away for long?" she asked. "That depends on the charges," Daniels replied. "The combination of firearms and stolen cash will carry weight. And if the robbery case sticks, it's even stronger." Emma glanced toward the living room, where Noah sat on the floor playing with blocks, blissfully unaware of the storm swirling around him. "I just don't want him anywhere near us. That's our goal," Daniels said. "For now, your part's done. But I'll be in touch when we need your statement in court." After they hung up, Emma stood for a long moment, staring at the quiet hum of her refrigerator, the neat rows of mugs on the counter, the simple normalcy of her home. It struck her that this peace had been more fragile than she'd ever realized threatened. Not by strangers, but by someone who once sat at the same dinner table. She walked into the living room and knelt beside Noah, pulling him into her arms. He giggled, pressing his face into her shoulder. She held him tighter, as if that alone could keep the world outside from creeping back in. Meanwhile, at the station, Kevin sat in the interview room, his cuffed hands resting on the table. Daniels entered, the evidence bag containing the map, and burner phone placed squarely in front of him. Kevin's eyes flicked to it, then away. "Let's talk about the box in your sister's shed," Daniels said. Kevin's jaw worked, but he stayed silent. Daniels leaned forward, his voice quiet but sharp. "You had family who didn't ask questions. A place to stash something until the heat died down. But you underestimated them, especially a 3-year-old. Kevin's lips curled into a bitter half-smile. "Figures." Daniels didn't move, letting the silence press down until Kevin finally looked away. It was going to be a long night, but for the first time since the shiny box had been found, the pieces were falling into place, and the truth was no longer hiding in Emma's backyard. The courthouse smelled faintly of paper, coffee, and the lingering perfume of too many anxious mornings. Emma sat in the gallery, her hands folded in her lap, trying to ignore the restless shuffle of lawyers and clerks moving through the aisles. She wasn't here to testify today, that would come later, but Daniels had called her the night before, telling her the preliminary hearing was open to the public. She told herself she didn't need to see it, but part of her did. She wanted to look Kevin in the eye one more time, to see the brother she remembered and the man he had become, and to finally accept that they were not the same person. When the bailiff called his name, Kevin shuffled into the courtroom in an orange jumpsuit, wrists chained to his waist. His hair was messy, his jaw shadowed with a few days' worth of stubble. For a moment, their eyes met. His expression was unreadable, no apology, no smile, just a faint trace of recognition before he looked away. The prosecutor outlined the case: possession of stolen property, illegal firearms, and suspected involvement in the Multnomah County robbery. The stolen cash from the shed had been traced to marked bills taken from that store, and the map Patel had found under Kevin's motel mattress had sealed the timeline. Kevin's public defender pushed back, arguing that the items in the shed couldn't be directly tied to him. "No fingerprints, no eyewitness," he said, but the prosecutor was ready. Surveillance footage from a pawn shop showed Kevin selling a firearm identical to one in the shed days before the box was hidden there. Emma's stomach tightened as the details stacked up. She could feel the tension in the room shift, small, subtle, but unmistakable. Kevin's fate was bending in one direction, and he knew it. When the judge ordered him held without bail pending trial, Emma let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. The gavel came down with a solid knock, and Kevin was let out the way he came, head slightly lowered, the chains at his waist clinking softly. Outside the courthouse, Daniels met her on the steps. "It's a strong case," he said. If the robbery charge sticks, we're talking years, not months. Emma nodded slowly. It's strange. I thought I'd feel happy or vindicated, but it's just heavy. That's how it usually is, Danielle said. Justice isn't about feeling good. It's about keeping the harm from spreading. She glanced at him. Do you think he'll ever change? Daniels hesitated. Maybe, but not because. Someone hoped he would. If it happens, it'll be because he finally runs out of places to hide. Over the next few weeks, life began to stitch itself back together. Noah's curiosity about the police dog became the stuff of bedtime stories. He'd tell anyone who'd listen how he had helped Officer Rex find a magic treasure box, complete with hand gestures and dramatic pauses. Emma let him tell it that way. It was his version of events, simple, clean, and free of the shadow she carried. The shed was empty now, swept and reorganized. The corner where the box had been holding nothing more dangerous than a rusted lawn chair. Daniels had been right. The police kept an extra patrol on her street for a while, but no one came looking for what Kevin had lost. The trial came months later. Emma did testify, answering questions about the day Noah had spoken to Rex, about Kevin's visits before and after prison, about the shed. She spoke calmly, but her voice cracked once when the prosecutor asked if she believed Kevin knew the box was there. Yes, she said, her eyes fixed on the jury. I believe he knew, and I believe he didn't care what it meant for me. In the end, the jury took less than 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. Kevin's sentence was long enough that Noah would be a teenager before the possibility of parole. The night after sentencing, Emma sat on her back porch, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. The yard was quiet, except for the steady hum of summer insects. She could see the shed in the moonlight, its paint peeling but its door secure. She thought of Kevin, not the man in the orange jumpsuit, but the boy he had been, the one who dared her to climb the maple tree in their grandmother's yard, the one who'd taught her how to skip rocks across the lake. That boy had been gone a long time, she realized, and chasing his shadow had cost her more than she wanted to admit. From inside, she heard Noah's small footsteps padding across the floor. He appeared at the screen door, hair tousled from. Sleep, Mommy, he said, rubbing his eyes. Is Rex coming back? She smiled faintly. Maybe someday, but we're safe now. He nodded, satisfied, and returned to bed. Emma stayed outside a while longer, watching the dark outline of the shed. It no longer felt like a hiding place for someone else's secrets. It was just a shed, again ordinary, harmless. In the stillness, she understood something Daniels had been trying to tell her from the beginning. The real victory wasn't in catching Kevin. It was in knowing she and Noah had come through, without letting the fear take root. A week later, a small package arrived at her door. Inside was a photograph Rex sitting beside Daniels in front of the station, both looking squarely at the camera. On the back, in Daniels' neat handwriting, it read, "For the boy who told the truth. Officer Daniels and Rex." Emma laughed softly, holding the photo in her hands. Then she framed it and set it on the kitchen counter, where Noah could see it every morning. And for the first time in months, she woke up to a day that felt entirely her own, quiet, ordinary, and safe.